Okay.
And she doesn't sound excited, Eric.
Oh, welcome to our meeting. I'm so glad you could come. I'm saying that to the recording voice. Yes. All right, here we are. It is Monday, August 2nd. This is the August 2021 version of Storytelling by and for Adults, a series that has been going for, I don't know, around 10 years. The first 8 years was in a cafe in Chennai. And then due to circumstances beyond our control, we shifted to Zoom. And I think it's been a good shift. So here we are. Today's program is, let me just give an overview. Donna Dudinsky is going to tell T. Jean, a folk tale. Zarin, I'm not going to say the last names because I'll mess it up. Zarin is going to tell the life story of Dr. Lakshmi Pratha. Amrita is going to tell a story called Make Small Differences. Briane is going to tell 1 Degree of Separation. That's a personal experience story. Robin in New York City is going to tell a story, a personal experience story titled Confirmed. And Sheila Arnold, is going to tell a social justice adaptation of Little Red Riding Hood. We know that big bad wolf is bad. So she's going to relate this to social justice somehow. The people in USA and Canada, East Coast, well, Donna, you're with us.
Yes.
It's 8:30 in the morning for you?
Yeah.
Yes. But
it's around almost 8:45 even. So
well, we're going
not early.
But the other people in Toronto and New York and Virginia, they'll be coming a little later perhaps. Okay, so Donna, please introduce yourself and the story. And we've already said you're in Toronto, right?
I'm in Toronto,
yes. But please introduce yourself and the story, and please tell us a story.
Thank you, Eric. So my name is Donna Dudinsky. I live in Toronto, but I'm originally from Montreal. That means a lot when you're in Canada, actually, because there's a rivalry between the two places. And in Montreal, they speak French. In Toronto, we mostly speak English and a ton of other languages because we have people who have joined us from all over the world. I work at a French language television station in Toronto. And when I was producing shows for them, I would sometimes go on research trips. And in this particular case, I went up to Hearst. I was fascinated because when I lived in Quebec, I didn't realize that there were people in Ontario, big French-speaking population in Ontario. And I was thrilled to be working in French in Toronto. And I was sent up on my job to a small town called Hearst, which is way north in Ontario. And it's almost entirely a French-speaking population. Now, in Ontario, there are many magnificent storytellers, conteurs, we call them. And a lot of their repertoire comes from the stories of Ti-Jean. Now, Ti-Jean is like Little John, right? Petit-Jean, Ti-Jean. And he's a lot like Jack, Jennifer, in England and in the US, right? You have Jack tales. And he's kind of like that character. And in the stories of Ontario Français, Ti-Jean, he usually ends up marrying the daughter of a rich merchant or a princess. But I have to say, where in Ontario are you going to find princesses? Even way back then, no. So when I get up to Hearst, it's a small town, and like I said, and the mayor was really excited that we were going to be filming there, and he took me on a tour of the town. And when we got to one particular house, he pointed it and he said, you know, this is where the real Ti-Jean lived, because there was a real Ti-Jean. And I went, oh yes? And he said, yes, let me tell you the story. So he did. Many, many years ago, Tijan married his childhood sweetheart, Bertha. She wasn't the daughter of a rich merchant. She wasn't a princess. She was, well, in the end, by the time the story takes place, she looked a lot like me. They called her Bertha, la grosse Bertha, big Bertha. And she and Tijan lived very happily. Now, it was a hard life because they were subsistence level farmers in a place that has only 67, count them, 67 frost-free days a year. So life wasn't that easy, but they had friends, they had neighbors, they loved one another, they worked hard together. And their only prized possession was a cow, an old cow named Cayette. And Bertha, she loved Cayette. Not as much as she loved Tijan, but she loved Cayette. There had been one particular winter that was so difficult, and the spring and the summer were terrible. The crops were not doing well. And Tijan realized they weren't going to make it through the next winter unless they did something drastic. And he thought, what could he do? And the only thing he could think of was that they had to sell their cow. And he had to tell Bertha, it's going to be hard. But he did it. One morning he said, Bertha, c'est une année difficile, it's been a tough year. And I'm afraid, on a besoin de 50 piastres, we need $50 to get through the winter and survive. And to do that, we're going to have to sell La Vieille Vache. We're going to have to sell Cayette. And Bertha, well, she just looked devastated. But she looked at Tijan and she said, Tijan, I know you've thought about everything. I know if you're telling me we have to sell the cow, the only thing you can do is sell the cow. So the next morning, she made him a beautiful breakfast, packed him a lunch, said goodbye to Cayette and Tijan went on his way to market, leading his cow with a little rope and singing a song that we sing in Ontario and Quebec, in the Maritimes. I went to the market de Montipanier sous mon bras. I went to the market de Montipanier sous mon bras. The first girl I met was la fille d'un avocat. I love you. Vous m'attendez guère. I love you. Vous m'attendez pas. And as he's walking along and singing his song, his neighbor Jules sees him. And Jules looks at his wife and goes, look at Tijan. Look at Tijan. I don't know what he's doing. Mais je vais jouer une tour. I'm going to play a trick on him. And he says to Tijan, où vas-tu? Where are you going? And Tijan said, oh, man, Jules, you said it's been a hard year. And I have to sell our Vieille Vache Cayette in market. I'm going to get $50 for her. Jules thought to him, $50, that's ridiculous. And then he said, Tijan, I don't know how to tell you this, but today isn't the day to sell cows in the market. Oh, no? A dit Tijan, no. C'est pas la journée de vendre les vaches, c'est la journée de vendre les cochons. It's not the day to sell cows, it's the day to sell pigs. Oh, really? But what am I going to do? J'ai pas de cochon, I have no pig. And Jules looked at him and said, Tijan, we're friends, we're neighbors, we help one another out. I'll tell you what, if you want, but only if you want, I will trade you. I'll trade you this pig, and he holds up this runty little pig, for your cow. And Tijan says, tu feras ça pour moi? You do this for me? Yes. Mais puisque tu le dis, ça doit être vrai. If you say so, it must be true. And with that, they shook hands, marché conclu, and Tijan traded his cow for the pig and went off, singing his little song. I went to the market de mon petit cochon sous mon bras. I went to the market de mon petit cochon sous mon bras. And as he's walking along, he sees André. And André sees him and says, Tijan, I didn't know you had a pig. And Tijan said, well, I didn't have a pig until 5 minutes ago. It's been a tough winter, a tough summer. It's going to be a hard winter. I have to sell the cow. I'm going to market to sell the cow. And Jules, our neighbor Jules, he tells me, Tijan, it's not the day to sell cows at the market. It's the day to sell pigs. And bless his heart, he knew I needed to make a sale. And he traded me his pig. And he holds up the runty little pig for my cow. And André thought about this and he thought, Tijan. I don't know how to tell you this, mais André, il avait tort, he was wrong. Really? Yes, André said. Jules told you it was the day to sell pigs, but it's not. It's the day to sell geese. Oh, mais puisque tu l'as dit, ça doit être vrai, I don't know what I'm going to do. And Tijan said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And André, he picked up this goose with feathers just dropping off it. I mean, it just looked like it was really early in the morning for a lot of people. And said, if you want, but only if you want, Tijan, I can do this. I will trade you this goose for your pig, and then you can go to the market and make a sale. Tu feras ça pour moi? Yes, said André. And Tijan said, merci, marché conclu. They shook hands, and off goes Tijan to the market. I went to the market de Montidois sous mon bras. I went to the market de Montidois sous mon bras. And he gets there, and he's so excited, right? Because it's a market. There's a lot of people around. And he sets up his little blanket, sets down his lunch, and starts working. Who'll buy my goose for sale? Goose for sale, goose for sale. He's doing this for hours, and people walk by and they look at him and they look at this goose magané, this bedraggled goose, and they just walk on. Now Tijan, he keeps up, right? He's persistent. He eats his lunch and he starts again. Who'll buy my goose for sale? This goes on all day long until the market's closing and people are leaving the market. And he watches them leave one by one. No one has bought his goose. No one's made a trade for his goose. And at the end, there's only him left and one merchant way back in the stalls at the back of the market. And he goes up to this guy. The guy's shoveling cow manure. And he sees Tijan. I mean, everybody around there, they kind of know one another. He says, Tijan, t'as l'air triste. You look so sad. What's wrong? And Tijan tells him the whole story, how he needed 50 pièces, how he decided to trade his cow, and his neighbor Jules told him it wasn't the day to sell cows, it was the day to sell pigs, and how his neighbor André said it wasn't the day to sell pigs, it was the day to sell geese, and he was there all day, and nobody wants to buy it. And the merchant looked at him and he said, Tijan, you left this morning with a cow, you traded it for a pig, and then you traded the pig for a goose? Yeah. Well, Mark, merchant said, I can't let this go by. And he said, Tijan, I'll help you out. I know you've been at the market all day. It's hard to leave here without having made at least a trade. So I'll tell you what, I'll trade you. I'll trade you this. And he holds up a bouse de vache. He holds up a pile of cow dung. And he goes, I can trade you this for your goose if you want, but only if you want, Tijan. And Tijan said, but the bouse de vache, what am I going to do with that? And the merchant looked at him and said, well, it's good for the garden, you know. Oh, said Tijan. Dans ce cas, okay. And he makes the trade. And the merchant, he gets a little placard, a little board there with cardboard, and he piles up some nice cow manure on there, and he gives it to Tijan, and Tijan gives him the goose. Merci, marché conclu, off Tijan goes. And the merchant watches Tijan walk off, and he just can't stop himself. I mean, how could he do this? He runs up to Tijan and goes, Tijan, do you realize what you've done? You left this morning with a cow. You're coming back home tonight with cow manure. Your wife is going to kill you. And he said, oh, mais pas ma Bertha, you don't know my Bertha. Elle approuve tout ce que je fais. She approves of everything I do. The merchant said, no one can approve of this. Tijan, she's going to give you the what for when you come home. I'll make you a bet. I'll bet you $5 that your wife is going to give it to you when you get home. And Tijan said, look, I'm an honest man. I can't do this. I can't take your money, really. Elle approuve tout ce que je fais. But the merchant insisted. So Tijan made the bet for $5, and the merchant follows him, right? Follows him to see what happens. And Tijan's walking down the road with this steaming pile of cow manure, and he's so happy. And the smell is like, people are wondering what's going on here. And they're asking one another, they're asking the merchant. The merchant explains everything. They can't wait to see what's going to happen when Tijan gets home. They can't. I mean, they know stories of Tijan, but this is over the top. So they're all following him home. They pass Jules' house, and Jules sees him with his crowd behind him, and Tijan carrying this bouse de vache. And he says, Tijan, Bertha, qu'est-ce que tu as fait? What did you do? Bertha, she's going to kill you. Mais Jules, you know my wife, you know, André, you know my wife, you know Bertha, she's not going to kill me. But André, as much as he likes Tijan, has to tell him, look, Tijan, I'll bet you $20 that Bertha's going to just give it to you when you get home. André, you're my friend, I can't do that to you. But André insisted, and Tijan, he took the bet. And when they passed Jules' house, of course, you can imagine Jules arrogant man that he was, bet Tijan $50 that Bertha wouldn't give him a knockout punch when he got home. And when Tijan approaches the house, there is Bertha sur le balcon. She's just sweeping with her broom, and she sees Tijan. She drops the broom. She goes, Tijan, Tijan, oh, I'm so glad to see you. How were you? Tell me everything. And Tijan said, oh, Bertha, j'ai travaillé fort. I worked hard. I worked so hard. You know, this morning when I left, our neighbor, Jules, he told me it wasn't the day to sell cows. Bertha, I was so upset. I didn't know what to do. But our wonderful neighbor, Jules, he offered to trade me a pig for our cow. Imagine, it was the day to sell pigs. And I made the trade. You made the trade, Bertha? You traded our cow for a pig? Oui. And she looked at him and she went, Tijan, this is fantastic. Every Christmas I want to make a tourtière, and we have never, ever had anything I could use to make the tourtière with. Oh, Tijan, merci. Où est le cochon? Where's the pig? And Tijan goes, Bertha, I told you my day was hard. I worked hard. Didn't end there. No. I walked past my neighbor Andre, and he told me, oh, mais Jules, il avait tort. He was wrong. It wasn't the day to sell pigs at the market. It was the day to sell geese. And imagine he traded me the pig for a goose. Okay, said Bertha. You traded away the pig for a goose? What? Wait. Oh, Tijan, you think of everything. Our pillows are flat. We need feathers. This is terrific. Où est l'oie? Where's the goose? Bertha, I went to the market. I was there all day. Je travaillais fort, but nobody wanted to buy my goose. And in the end, this merchant, this lovely merchant, and he pointed to him in the back of the crowd. He said, he made a trade with me. He traded me this for the cow. And he holds up the cow manure. And she looks at Tijan and he goes, c'est bon pour le jardin. It's good for the garden. And now tears are rolling down Bertha's face, and she looks at him and she says, Tijan, all these years we've had the cow and we never thought to use the manure as fertilizer. Et Tijan, all my life, you know this, from the time we were little, I've wanted a rose bush in my front yard and I could never grow one. Oh, mais Tijan, c'est fantastique. Come in, I've made a nice meal for you. And Tijan says, I'll be in a minute, Bertha, but first I have a little bit of business to conduct. And with that, he collected the $50 from Jules, the $20 from André, the $5 from the merchant. And with that money, they were able to buy back their cow, get a pig, get a goose, and make it through the winter. And I knew the story was true, because when the mayor finished telling me, he pointed to the front of the garden, and sure enough, there was the most beautiful rose bush there I had ever seen. And that, my friends, is the true story of Tijan.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful story.
Thanks. I love Tijan, and I love Bertha, and I love their relationship.
Yes. You know, I was wondering the whole time how the situation was going to be recovered, and it was recovered wonderfully. Of course, the story is reminiscent of Jack and the Beanstalk. You mentioned Jack, right? Jack sells. Yeah. Is it Jack sells a cow for 3 magic beans?
Yeah.
So here there's a similar transaction with a cow, but the thing that saves the day here is not just Jack's authenticity and kindness, but his wife's. That's what really saves the day.
It's funny, I told the story for a long time, and at one stage someone looked at me and she said, what I love most about this story is Bertha and her acceptance of Tijan. And it had never occurred to me. I guess because I'd lived with the story in a number of ways for so long that was a big part of it. So Amrita, when you mentioned like the flexibility, the need to be flexible, right? Things change at different times and how we have to accept them. It was just, I thought, well, there you go. She just accepts and they thrive. I mean, and he does the same with her. So it was interesting. It's a combination, I believe, of a lot of European stories as well, right? Because once they travel over here and they travel across the country, they just pick up all sorts of different stories and come together in the character of whomever is the character of that region.
They're a great couple. I mean, okay, the guy is sort of what is known as a simpleton, right? Kind of a simpleton. But his wife, she's not a simpleton, but she's just positive. She's optimistic. She sees the positive side of things, and that saves the situation. I have to tell this story to my wife.
And I'm sure one day she'll tell a version of that to you. You never know.
Anybody?
Not a simpleton.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, definitely a rare kind of wife, huh?
Anyone else? Any thoughts, comments about the story or the way it was told?
So I would just like to say, Donna, that while you were narrating the story, and I was just thinking when he's going to go back home, and I don't know what's going to be the reaction, and it's going to be like, the ending would be all like fighting, but how it just turned out, and in such a wise way, which I think was the beauty of the story, that just take people as they are and go with the flow. How well she could positively change the whole situation. So I think it was great.
Yeah, I'd like to say, Donna, how much I enjoyed the story, and particularly how you blended two languages. As someone who speaks, only one language, I'm always in awe at that seamless blend. And it just adds such a lovely rhythmical quality and also a magical quality to the story. And the fact that we have a tendency to be, to look down upon people who have simplistic ways of looking at life's fortune and misfortune. And shame on us, because the beauty of that couple shows their love for one another, their understanding and acceptance of one another, and their strength as a couple. So I think it just says a lot as a little story. And the characters are just charming. So thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
I came in the middle of the story, and I was absolutely captivated. You have just like total command of your audience, even though you're in a completely different place. You had me, what is it? You really had me at the word go, really, from the very, I said, oh, this is a storyteller.
Thank you, Rena.
I know you've been around for a long time, and I know your reputation and everything, but it was like, wow, she's got it. Yeah.
Thanks. It's always the story, right? Because when you love the story, it comes out.
Well, it's
the story is true.
That's what I felt, that you really, it was like you had taken him under your wing. That you had a real warm feeling for this man. Yeah.
You went between French and English, and you also brought in a good deal of singing, which was also wonderful. But it's not just the story, Donna. You are the best person I know in terms of storyteller I know in terms of telling naturally.
Exactly.
When Donna tells us a story, we feel like we're in her dining room, sitting around the table, and Donna's telling what happened today, or you know, she's just in Jewish language, it's called a mensch, someone who's just, you know, really talking in a very honest way, and with some wisdom in there, and it's just you know, like we're having a conversation with you. I call it candid storytelling, but whatever you call it, you know how to do it. You got it. And do you teach? Do you conduct workshops?
No.
Well, if you ever do, you'll find that it's not easy to coach people to tell in this way, because many people tend to feel that when they're telling a story, they have to put on a show. You know, they have to perform. And somehow it's not easy to just be so natural. Has it come naturally to you, or have you learned it?
No, I think it has. I remember when I was producing documentaries and I was working with a new on-camera host, and I mean, I knew he was going to be really good, but the thing is, it was always artificial.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the camera could pick up the artificiality, right? So I said, talk as if you're talking to your son.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with stories, it's just always been my way of, this is so good. I really want to tell you this. It's really a lot of fun. Let me know what you think, you know, but anyway, it's a huge compliment coming from you, Eric. Thank you so very much. But I have to tell you that the genius of storytelling in Quebec is named Fred Pellerin. And Fred Pellerin can sell out huge stadiums in Montreal for people who just want to come to see storytelling. And he came to Ontario a couple of times, and people were flying in from Timmins from far away just to see this man, hear him tell stories. And I said the same thing to a friend that you just said, Eric. He was on stage, but it was like I was sitting in his living room listening to him tell me. Mm-hmm. So I think that you just want to embrace the people who are with you and say, hey, let me share this with you. So I guess it's natural, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're somehow comfortable with yourself.
Not usually.
Well, but
and always full of self-doubt.
That's what it takes. Now, regarding the goose, you know, it's just as well that Berta didn't see that goose, because that goose did not have very good feathers, right?
It did not.
Well, why do you think the story has it that way? I mean, it could have been that the goose had beautiful feathers, and that would have made it all the more, you know, to the point that Berta would have said, oh, I wish we would have gotten that goose for the sake of the feathers for the pillows. Why do you think what does it add to the story that the goose was so bedraggled, which is a very good word that you used?
Because of the way he was regarded by his neighbors and people who knew him, right? It's just like he's a little bit debil, he's a little bit silly. So I'm not going to give him my best, because it doesn't matter. He'll go for anything. And what compounds it for me is that each animal is like worse than the last in terms of
smaller,
it is.
Yeah,
smaller and in even worse condition than the runty pig was the bedraggled goose, right?
I see. Okay, so it's really just as well that Berta did not see that goose.
She would have accepted it anyway and made something else of it, I figure.
Great. Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity, Eric. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else want to? Yeah, Maura, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's hardly anything left to say. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And it's Donna, if you tell, I believe every word, no matter what. And it reminded me of that story of the fish, you know, after it ended, I'd remind myself, fish don't really walk, do they? So, and what I also loved was the end. Well, of course, there's the rose bush. So that's the proof of it. It's just a lovely end. So it's a wonderful story. I've heard it before, but never like that. So thanks you.
Laura. It's so good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Okay, shall we move on to the next story and storyteller? Okay, so that is Zarin, and I know Zarin, there you are.
Yeah, Eric.
Yes, please, Zarin, introduce yourself and the story. Tell us where you're telling from, and please tell us a story.
Yeah. I am Zarin. I am a researcher by profession and a storyteller by passion. I was mentored by Dr. Eric Miller. So that's a little introduction about myself, and I am from Chennai, India. Recently, I went to a shop to buy a pen for my assignment. I saw a beautiful pen and I thought, yes, I have found a pen with which I want to write my assignment. I took this pen to the billing counter, and on my way to the billing counter, I saw another pen which was on a discounted price. Usually, we buy things which we don't intend to buy when they are on a discount sale. So I thought, why not pick up this pen too? So I took that pen as a backup pen. I thought, okay, let me buy this too. So finally, I ended up buying 2 pens. I brought them home. I sat down to write my assignment. I took my best pen, and when I started to write, the ink did not flow through the nib. I was so disappointed. I was dismayed. But the backup pen, which I bought on the discount offer, it worked and it helped me to finish my assignment. So how many times our judgments and assessments have gone wrong? So this is a little thought which I am leaving you all with to reflect upon, and let me narrate the story to all of you now. During the early 80s, in one of the southern states in India, a little girl cried. She cried and she told her mother, "Mama, I don't want to go to school, Mama. I don't want to go to school." The mother told her daughter, "Baby, father has got the school admission for you after a lot of struggle. How can you say that you will not go to school?" The little girl was not ready to go to school even then. She cried. She cried and she said, "No, Mama, I don't want to go to school at all. Please leave me." The mother told her daughter, "My dear little girl, will you go to school if I come with you?" The little girl was convinced. She told her mother, "Mama, if you accompany me, then I will go to school." Thus the mother accompanied her daughter to school. She dropped her daughter in the classroom, and the mother sat down under a tree which was there in the school playground. She waited, and when this mother was waiting, she could hear her daughter crying often. So what made her daughter to cry? Generally, kids don't like school. Few kids don't like school. So they cry out when they have a little discomfort, they cry. But what's so different in this little girl's case? The little girl cried because people made fun of her. They made fun of her medical condition. This little kid had a medical condition named dwarfism. She could not grow beyond an average human height, which is 4 feet and 10 inches. People made fun of her because of her medical condition. And every day, to support her daughter, the mother stayed and waited for her till the school got over. And things were not easy for this little girl. She was denied a lot of opportunities. The little girl was very good at singing, but the teachers were not ready to take her name. They did not write her name on the list when she was willing to participate in a music contest. One day, the girl was not ready to give up. She asked her teacher, "Why is that you're not taking my name into this list?" The teacher told her, "I cannot take your name because you're small and you cannot sing." The little girl was not ready to buy in this logic. she asked the teacher, please give me a chance. And what has my size got to do with my singing abilities? The teacher took this little girl's name for the music contest after a lot of reluctance. And to everyone's surprise, the little girl got a prize. And not only that contest, almost all the contests which were held at school, she came first. But things were not easy for this little girl. The little girl, Lakshmi Prada, had to face a lot of obstacles because her father had a transferable job. So she had to shift schools often. And every time when she moved to a new school, she had to struggle to settle down. And when she finished high school, she wanted to become a dentist. She had very good marks, she had good grades, but the university people were not ready to give her an admission. The principal of the dental college called her and he told her, Lakshmi Prada, we cannot admit you. Lakshmi Prada was surprised. She asked him, why? Why can't you give me an admission? I have good marks. The principal told her, you have marks, but you're short. You cannot do any of the clinical procedures and I cannot give you an admission into my college. That's when Lakshmi Prada told him, if I fail to do any of the clinical procedures, I will quit all by myself. You don't have to send me back out then, but I myself will take a conscious decision and I will move out of this college. And after that, there was no force to stop her. She became one of the outstanding students of Trivandrum Dental College. Things were not easy for her even after she finished her college. People were not ready to give her a job. They told her, no, we cannot give you a job. We cannot take you in because you are short. We cannot take you in. So Lakshmi Prada took up a job of a lecturer in a private college, which paid her too less. After a while, she thought, I should move to another job which could pay me well. So that's when IT, information technology, was making an impact in all the fields, and medical field was not an exception too. So Lakshmi Prada started to learn technology. And also she did her MBA. And she took up a job of a consultant. Her job was to connect all the doctors who stayed abroad with the engineers who stayed in India. She had to transfer the requirements of his job, of the doctors who stayed abroad to the engineers who stayed in India. The engineers were not ready to listen to her initially. They told her, what could she know? I don't think she's good at her job. And why should we take instructions from her? But Lakshmi Prada has always faced a lot of reluctance, and she has always faced a lot of rejection from the people around her. So this time she was not ready to give in. She fought and she proved herself. And yes, she became too successful at her career. She was a successful career woman. And no one was able to stop her. She became successful. And now she thinks, though I was short, I had giant aspirations, and I did not let people to bully me, and I did not give up on my dreams. Now I stand tall as a doctor, all because of my aspirations and my willpower. And also she feels thankful to her parents and her siblings who always supported her. And I left you all with a thought initially, right? I said like our judgments and our assessments, right, might go wrong. So I just want all of you to bring that back again. And there is a question which I want to ask all of you. How many times our judgments and our assessments has made another person's life miserable? How many times we have put another person's life under misery because of our wrong judgments and assumptions? And when I had a conversation with myself on what story I want to tell here today, I thought the story will be apt. I came across a little piece of write-up in Better India about Dr. Lakshmi Prada, and I thought I should share this story with all of you here. And that's one of the reasons why I shared it here. And yes, every time when I come to Eric's forum, I always make sure that I bring in a story which is less discussed upon or which is a bit different from the usual one. So thank you, Eric, for this opportunity, and thank you everyone for listening to this story patiently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So you found that story very inspirational.
Yes, I found it very inspirational, and we generally don't talk about things like this. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it. So we personally feel this should not be spoken of. We have to speak for such people is what I felt. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this story.
Mm-hmm.
The more I wanted to discuss about was our assumptions and judgments rather than somebody else's potential, right? We tend to misjudge them. And our misjudgments cost their peace, mental peace.
Anybody, any thoughts, comments, questions? I must admit that when I saw the word dwarf in the story title, the title of the story is what what is it, like a
dwarf size with giant aspirations.
Dwarf size with giant aspirations. I wondered if it was correct to use the word dwarf, but then Zarin told me that people who have this condition now, they have embraced the word dwarf. It's like gay people, long ago the word queer was a very negative word, but gay people have embraced that word and rehabilitated it, and now it's a proud word. That the queer community, it's a strong word, it's a positive word, and it seems that that a similar thing has happened with the word dwarf. That it's not an insult. It is a medical condition, and people who have it seem to be proud to have it.
Yes, it's not their fault. The real reason behind their misery is us, who make them to feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they are okay with their condition, we make them to feel bad is what I felt.
Mm-hmm.
If I may add here.
Yes, go ahead.
By and large, it's the human tendency to seek something that is similar to what we all are. You always like to embrace similarity, whether it's your color, whether it's your community, whether it's your language. When you find something that is similar to you, it is easier to accept. When there is something that is different, it takes time for a person to accept, because that's the stereotypical conditioning that we've all gone through. But now the changes are rapid and the world is opening up. I think the present generation is more open, like Eric said, to lesbians and gays. We have come to accept transgenders. We used to call them, I mean, they never had a place in the society, but they are very much citizens of whichever country they are, and the acceptance is coming. So like you said, dwarfism is a condition, a medical condition, and people are by and large changing. The story is based in the 80s. I don't think it'll be that bad for a child if they had a condition in the present times.
Yeah, that's true, because we address such situations now. We tend to make a conscious effort not to judge someone, and also we make sure that we include them these days. That's there.
The
But still,
society,
I could see this stereotyping around. It is not stopped
society as
completely.
such is more compassionate now. There is more understanding. Even the schools and the educators and everybody is now aware of the need for empathy, which was lacking in the 80s. And it would have been terrible for that child to have to move from school to school, because even normal children find it very difficult to adapt when they have to make new friends every now and then. So I can imagine how Lakshmi Prada, what she would have gone through. A lovely selection, Zarin. Thank you for sharing this good story.
Thank you. Thank you, Karna. Thank you a lot.
Jennifer? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it was a really important story to tell. And I loved your little coda at the beginning, the little prologue with the pens, because you put yourself in the position of having made a judgment. And I think maybe if you describe just a little bit more the beauty of this pen, the outside attraction, the color, and then maybe by contrast, the rather ordinary pen that was on sale, then I think you've made a value judgment that didn't come through. The other thing too, because this is a real person's story, I didn't really get the idea, I didn't sort of assimilate that this was a small person. You know, we used to call them dwarfs, and I'm not sure what the politically acceptable term is, and if they've embraced, you know, if the people themselves have embraced that term, then I think that gives us permission to reference it. But I think more of a physical description of the little girl will help us see more clearly what the condition was that she was suffering from. And that would change for me though, because all the time I'm 5'3", so I'm not very much taller than 4'10". So to me, that little girl would not have been sort of out of the ordinary until she got older. But because of that condition, there are other physical characteristics that go along with that. So that's the only thing that for me got me hung up.
Yeah, so actually the girl is just 3 foot 10 inches even now. So I did not wish to tell all of it now, so because the story will become too heavy for all of us here. That's one of the reasons I marked the certain portions of the story. Else I would have, and she had a plaster around her leg always. So all these things included might make the story more heavy. So that's one of the reasons why I made it lighter in certain parts. So that was my reason. So she's not grown behind, even now she's only 3 foot and 10 inches tall.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now, Amrita, are you ready?
Yes, Eric.
Very good. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you're telling from, and introduce the story, and please tell us a story.
Namaste, everyone, and a hello. I'm very grateful, Eric Miller, that you've given me this wonderful opportunity. And I'm so happy that I'm a part of the storytelling session. I'm Amrita, and I'm from Jaipur, called the Pink City. It's in India. And the story that I'm going to narrate today is originally written by Lauren Isley, though I have modified it a little, but the essence remains the same. Ever since I heard this story, it has really touched me, and I'm trying to apply it in my life. So let me not, without further ado, let me just narrate it. The title of the story is Make Small Differences. Once, there was a man who lived in Chennai. He had a very hectic schedule. Work, home, and work was his only routine. But every evening after his work, he would go to a beach which was near his house. he would just wander there, lost in his own thoughts. The noise of the waves, the soft sand, the chattering of the children would just rejuvenate him. It was one such evening when he was at the beach. He saw few people reading books. Some children were giggling and collecting shells. Few of them were making sandcastles. Some of them were playing with a ball. There were many vendors selling coconut water, ice creams, cold drinks. Amongst all the hustle bustle, the man spotted a young boy crouched near the water, scooping something out and throwing it back into the sea. The man stood there and wanted to notice the young boy. He was very curious. He realized that the boy was shuffling a little further on the beach, then repeating the same actions again and again. That is, stopping, scooping, throwing, and moving. Stopping, scooping, throwing, and moving. So he approached the boy and asked, "What are you doing?" The boy said, "I'm throwing these starfish back into the sea. The tide is going out, and if I don't throw them, they're all going to die." The man was quiet for a while. Then he grinned and said, "Son, do you realize there are thousands of beaches all over the world and miles of them? I'm sure hundreds of starfish are dying today. I don't think you can possibly make a difference." The boy looked at the man and replied calmly, "Sir, if everything that I do in my life needs to have a huge immediate impact, then I'm very afraid I will end up doing very little in my life. Sometimes small things add up and turn out to be something big. They have ripples which go further than we can see. Today, those starfish that I'm going to save are going to produce thousands more. So the next time you get a chance to make a small difference, don't think of the big picture. Just do it. After all, the things that might not make a difference in your life might make in somebody else's life." After saying this, he became quiet, looked away, bent down, picked up another starfish and threw it back into the water. Then he looked at the man, smiled, and said, "I made a difference to this one at least. Thank you."
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So the boy was saving the starfish one by one.
Yes, at least whatever he could do with the little time he had, and he was trying to make a difference in his own little way.
So the man learned something from the boy.
Yes.
There are many.
I guess it made a difference to the starfish that he saved, if not to all the starfish in the world. To the ones that he saved, it did make a difference to them, to their lives. That's the essence, I guess. Very nicely told. Thank you.
Thank you, Padma. And actually, it's very true that sometimes we just feel that this is something very small. If I don't do it, it doesn't matter. Or what difference is it going to make? But we really don't know how these small things are turning out to be big, and people will join. And so this is the message, that the boy is trying to give it to the man and the world, I think. So it has really touched me. And by profession, I'm a teacher and I'm working with children. So I'm really trying to apply these small things and making a difference in their life, because we don't know what small things make a huge difference and, further take them far in their life.
It reminds me of two other stories. One of when they were building the bridge to Sri Lanka, remember? And the animals were putting stones to make the bridge, and the bears were putting big boulders, and a little squirrel took a little pebble, and the bears said to the squirrel, what you're doing is no use, it's just a little pebble. But then Ram came and said, no, I appreciate every little bit. So he appreciated the squirrel. And then there's the story about there was a fire in the forest, and one little sparrow.
The little parrot, a little parrot.
Okay, a parrot. One little bird wanted to help put out the fire. So the bird swooped down into a river or a pond and got wet, and then flew up into the air and shook itself, so that a few drops of water at least would come down. And you would think that those few drops of water would not stop the forest fire, right? But according to the story, it's a story that has a God in it. The God sees what the bird is doing, and the God says, okay, if this bird is making such an effort, I will also help. And the God then put a lot of water to put out the fire.
Mm.
So there are many stories like this about a little an effort. It's it's the thought that counts. It's the effort that counts. And like you say, we don't know what will be the ripples as a result of what we do.
Yeah, and also a Dutch boy who saved his country by stopping the water from flowing in. There will be a little hole on the wall. So
he's putting his finger in the
Right.
Stop the water from coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I was reminded of that story.
Even there's a story by Dr. Seuss, right? I think Horton Hears a Who, where the certain creatures are making a sound, but it's not loud enough for the needed reason. And then one more little creature says "who," and that is enough to put it over the level, and then they succeed. So there are a lot of stories which give that lesson of try, make an effort. You don't know what the result will be, but at least you will feel better if you make an effort.
Right.
Pandya Rajan, go ahead. Oh, you gotta turn your mic on.
Yeah, Amrita, you described the beach when you in your story.
Mm-hmm.
The story itself is very, very small, tiny, but the description added the effect for the story, because what was happening on the beach, what we normally see, that you described it very nicely. Actually, Lara Sim used to tell us, see, don't rush into the story. Come on, describe. She said DESCRIBE, describe. That's what she says. Don't run. So that you did it very nicely. I was reminded of the advice given by Lara Sims. So, and it really, I just closed my eyes when you were telling the story and visualized what was happening in the beach. And that was very nice. I liked it. And talking about the small drops, Neil Armstrong, when he landed on moon, he said, one small step, great leap for the mankind. That's what he said. And the reverse side of the story, I remember, because everyone is telling the same side of the story. There is the reverse side. There was a pot. Everyone was asked to pour 1 glass of milk, but everyone thinking that everyone will pour. After all, let me put water. Actually, at the end of the day, when they opened the pot, It was only water because everyone thought that other fellow will do it. So the small thing, what is going to do if I don't only one glass of water in a pot of milk? But what happened? It was entire water. So there is a reverse side of the concept that he told in the story. Thank you. That was.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, you're right. Actually, it was a very small story. And that's why I added to the description so that, there's a little plot that is made. And what you're saying is very true. I'll also keep in mind that, yes, it's always good to have descriptions and then not rush in the story.
Greatest authors, if you read the authors, greatest story writers, they always describe what has happened. If they are talking about somebody is walking on the Wall Street, see, you may be very familiar because Eric may be familiar with the Wall Street. But for you who have never visited Wall Street, it needs some description. There is a bull, and there is why there is a bull, and what happens on a busy day when the index is going up or going down, crashing. What happens? How people behave, and that type of description adds to the value of the story. I think Eric will add something to it. Thank you.
Okay, let us proceed. Brian, are you ready?
I am ready.
And you are also in Toronto?
Yes, I am.
And you are going to regale us with a personal experience story entitled 1 Degree of Separation. Is that correct?
I hope so.
Yes. Okay. Well, now please introduce yourself fully and please tell us a story.
My name is Briane Nasimok. I am in Toronto. If you were here earlier, Toronto, the greatest city in Canada, unlike Donna Dudinsky pushing Montreal. I would say I would be a recovering comedian. About 8 years ago, I shifted my focus, and Donna has been very helpful in helping me develop things. And I thought I'd share this personal story. We are all just really 1 degree of separation from cancer. In Canada in 2020, 225,000 people were diagnosed with different kinds of cancer, and about 83,000 passed away. And for me, cancer hit home when I was in my early 20s and my sister was 30 years old, and she developed breast cancer and ended up having a double mastectomy. Now, my sister Karen was the true star in our family. She sang, she acted, she played piano. And when she graduated from high school, she wanted to be in the arts, but that wasn't something for a nice Jewish girl to do in the 70s, so she became a teacher. But she was responsible for my first ever comic appearance. When I was 8 years old, our family went to Windsor, Ontario for Christmas. We went to this resort called the Elmwood, and performing in the nightclub there were 2 stand-up comedians, Jack Eagle and Frank Mann, and I saw them and I loved what they did. I know what I wanted to be. In fact, I got them to adopt me for a couple days afterwards so I could actually find out more and more about stand-up. Now, when I got back to Toronto, my sister Karen found a little routine for the 2 of us to do in front of family and friends. It was called Lady Featherbottom. And even though I was the straight man, I did get 1 laugh when I had to ask her my very bad British accent if she was intimate with Lady Featherbottom. Well, after about 6 months, my sister decided to pursue a solo career and broke up the act, but we were still close. We spent time together. We went to theater. We went to the Hop. And when she was 60 years old, the cancer came back, this time into her sternum. Now, her husband and her 2 kids, they were really busy, so they couldn't go to chemo with her, but I could because I was in between gigs. I'm always in between gigs. So I'd sit with her in the hospital, and she had a PICC line put into her arm, and they would pump the evil toxins into her. And no matter how bad it was, how bad she felt, how she was in pain sometimes, she would never let it be shown. She was very optimistic, and I loved her courage. when the spring came about, she asked for the PICC line be taken out because she wanted to go to her cottage and swim in her lake. And the doctors weren't happy with that idea. They wanted her to keep taking chemo, but she hated it. So they took the PICC line out. She went away for the summer and had a fabulous time. But in the fall, the cancer came back into her brain. And in January of that year, 8 of us were with her at the Hill House Hospice when she passed away with dignity and courage. So about 6 years later, and I'm sitting in my Dr. Todd's office, and I'm waiting for the results of my 3rd PSA test. And I'm a little nervous. For those of you who don't know, a PSA test is a blood test where they try to figure out how much cancer there might be in your prostate. Now, a prostate is a gland that men have, which is located in their, we'll say, nether regions down there. And it's kind of bothersome because I think I'm pretty young to have prostate cancer. I'm sitting in my Dr. Todd's office waiting for him to come in. He enters the room, he sits across the table from me, he opens up this folder, he looks down, he looks up, and then he says, "Hey, let's talk about some basketball." Now, I don't want to talk basketball. And he's going on and on. I blurt out, I go, "Well, what's my score?" He looks down again and he looks up, he goes, 4.8, and he nods and smiles, and I nod and smile. I don't know what it means. And then I have to say, "Is that good? Is that bad? Do I have prostate cancer?" He looks down again. He goes, "It's not that bad. It's not that good. I think we'll just watch and wait." Watch and wait for what? "Well, over the next 6 months, we'll give you some tests and we'll watch the results and we'll wait to see if the numbers go up. But by the way, if you were 10 years older, we wouldn't worry about anything because I'm pretty sure something else would kill you before the cancer." I think that's called bedside manner. I couldn't ask him anything else because he had to go see his next patient. On my way home, I'm thinking about, do I have cancer? What am I going to do? I get to the house and I see my partner. Now, Dr. Todd and I refer to my partner as Dr. Google because she does a lot of research online. She was not watching or waiting. She got in touch with her medical guru in San Francisco. He had an idea. We should have a better view of what's happening in my prostate. So he sends me to this clinic just outside Detroit, Michigan in the United States. I go into this very high-tech room. It looks like it's something that should be on the deck of the Starship Enterprise. And they put me in this room, and 20 minutes later, they have a beautiful full-color rendering of my prostate. I take it back across the border. By the time I get to Toronto, Dr. Google set up 6 appointments with 6 different surgeons. They all have to do their own, well, the first 5 all have to do their own prostate exam after looking at this beautiful rendering. Now, I won't go into detail, but the prostate exam involves 1 digit and the rear entrance. I'll leave it there. I get to the 6th doctor. He's the head of one of the great cancer hospitals in Toronto, Princess Margaret. He looks at the rendering. He doesn't have to do his own digital exam because he knows we're not watching, we're not waiting. We're going to do the gold standard, cut my prostate out. This is not an idea I like. I have no thoughts of having a scalpel down there in that part of my body because if he slips up, the mechanism could be ruined. Now, Dr. Google's all in favor of getting this done right away, but I say, let's wait. I have one more research to do. A friend of mine had worked in a local television station. He did a 5-part series on prostate cancer, and he had another doctor for me to see, Dr. Morton. And I brought Dr. Google along. Dr. Morton did something called brachytherapy. Now, instead of using a scalpel, he would take a very long needle, put it into my prostate, and put radioactive seeds there and eradicate the sucker. This is a much better idea for me than the gold standard. I want nothing down there that's going to cut. Dr. Google does her research. She finds out this is a good alternative. 3 months later, I'm at Sunnybrook Hospital at 8 a.m. I'm an outpatient, so they give me a local anesthetic so I can enjoy the whole procedure. I go into the operating room, but there's a giant chair in there, like a barber seat with like stirrups. And I open my legs wider than they ever have been and ever will be in my life, even if I do the splits. And for the next hour, they put 86 radioactive seeds into my prostate and they work away. Because when they eradicate the sucker, the prostate cancer could be gone. When I finished, the first thing I asked Dr. Morton is, Can I now make popcorn on my nether regions? He says, no, it's not that radioactive. Just keep small children and cats away from there for 2 weeks. Dr. Google doesn't believe in this, so she goes to her dentist. She gets one of those shields, those lead shields they put on you when they're doing their x-rays, and she buys it and she sleeps with us, between us for the next 6 months. 3 weeks later, I'm back with Dr. Morton. He looks at what's happened. He said, everything looking fine. And for the next decade, every year for 10 years, I go to see him 1 week to get a blood test and the second week for his digital exam to watch my numbers go down and down and down and down. After 10 years, I'm at 0.01. He thinks he's pretty sure the cancer is gone for now. I never see Dr. Morton again because there's no need to. Everything seems fine. I sort of forget about my cancer for a while. But then not too long ago, someone else dies from cancer and comes back to me. I start to worry, of course, but then I remember what Dr. Todd had told me, and I'm a little more relieved because I'm pretty sure if the cancer comes back, something else will kill me first. And I owe that belief and that view of life and that optimism because of my sister Karen and the 1 degree of separation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So what's your status now regarding that situation?
The same status of the man who's falling off the 40-story office building as he goes by each story. Here's so far so good, so far so good, so far so good.
Yes.
That's my view.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting because the first time I did this story, because after I thought about doing it here, I did it in Toronto. We have a series called 1001 Friday Nights of Storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a special show and I sort of previewed it for the people who were organizing it. And there was a real discussion on whether or not I should do it because of the content. And it was interesting, the other tellers who were there all said, do it. And of all the stories I've done when I did it at that festival, it's gotten the most response from people because I think of the way I handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And I should just say, for Zarin, you might notice I have a birthmark here, which used to go all the way down and was a lot huger. So I was bullied very early at public school because I also was husky. So that part of the story related to me, not that I was at that degree of being short, but and I think it helped me develop my approach to life.
Yes, actually, I was speechless after listening to your story. I don't know, you have a lot of optimism. Just I hope that even we are more positive, right, to accepting and go from all the difficulties which we face. Thank you for sharing the story with all of us. And I'm emotional now, to be very frank.
Vasuki?
Yes, I'm so glad you spoke about this. It takes courage to open up and speak about these things to an audience like us who don't know you personally. I've lost a lot of family members to cancer. My grandmom, my father, my aunt, my sister-in-law, various different forms of cancer. And I always, the next generation, my children and my peers, I ask people to tell their story, because if by the listening of these stories, if someone becomes aware and gets a test done, gets a scan done, gets a biopsy done, and if that can save them, that would be the best thing. And thank you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't tell traditional. I have a lot of stories and most of them are pretty well humor based because I've had a fairly hilarious life. And this is one that I thought, okay, I really want to share, and hopefully it will twig in others. I mean, when I was doing stand-up, I was trying to explain the difference from stand-up for me was, hey, look at me, laugh at me, love me. And the difference for me in storytelling is if I can have a story that relates to people or gets them thinking. That's not what happened in my stand-up days. So I appreciate any chance to tell a story and for a whole group of people. So thank you, Eric, for doing that.
Yes. Well, you,
say,
oh, go ahead, Rena.
I just wanted to say that there's something so, I really appreciated the partnership with your wife, or you call her your partner, and not just accepting a point of view and saying, okay, well, that's it, cancer, blah, you know, but looking for more and looking for solutions and looking for the thing that suits you the best, and her support, I think that was just terrific. That came through really, really well.
She
Dr.
doesn't
Google,
like me.
I love that.
She doesn't like me
What?
mentioning her name, so it's good that she does have that reference from Dr. Todd and
Dr.
I as
Google.
Dr. Google. Yes, well, that's what she
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well,
Eric, if I
yes,
can mention one thing,
go ahead.
we have a fringe festival that's still happening here in Toronto, and I brought together 5 other fabulous storytellers, and I'll just put in the chat a link to that. And I think Donna will tell you that there are some really fabulous people who are on this show. So I will put a link in there, and hopefully people want to come and see it, they can.
Please do. So Brian, you not only have a sense of humor, you have a classic dry sense of humor.
Mhm.
Also known as a wry sense of humor, W-R-Y. And even the word came up in my mind, insouciance, which I had to look up on the internet just now, and it means a casual lack of concern, or the expression of a casual lack of concern, and a casual indifference. So what can you tell us about your dry sense of humor? How has it come to you? How have you cultivated it? What are your associations with your dry sense of humor?
I think the fact that starting out very young, that that was my defense mechanism for being bullied with my birthmark and being husky, and being the baby in the family, I had to get away with storytelling, but not being too overt to get my brother in too much trouble and let them know I was lying. Mm-hmm. So I think that's it. I mean, I was pretty well formed by the time I was 16. I lost my father, my best friend, the little girl I babysat for, who all died. My father of a heart attack, my best friend in a bike accident, the little girl I babysat for in a car accident. So I think it's the fact also that the shyness of I'll tell you about one quick story. I was hosting an event at my university. Mm-hmm. And I was very subdued. I was co-hosting with the principal. I was very subdued at the opening of it. And I was not happy with it. It was a live event. And as I sat down, when I was doing stand-up, I went from storyteller to comic to insult host. And I went, okay, I've got to use this character now. And for the rest of that event, I was much funnier because I took that character. So when I am telling a story, this is how I am. Mm-hmm. If I'm hosting in a in an event, I would be leaning to the other side of me because I believe we all have sides.
Mhm.
And when I'm telling a story, this is the way I want to tell it.
Mhm.
I don't want to be, because I've been overt and knocking on the head and pushing. There's a line with the audience.
Mm.
If you go too close to them, you push them away. If you're
Mm.
too far away from them, they won't come in. So
Mm.
what is that balance? And for me, when I'm telling stories, that's the balance, if that makes sense.
The dry sense of humor.
Using that approach when I'm doing it, because that's going to relate more than me pushing that I'm funny,
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all the comments. And I hope to come back again in a few months if I can find a story that will work.
Great. Well, the way it's working, it's like once a year, because we only have 6 or 7 people in a program, and over 12 months, that's 60, 70 people. So it's about once a year. But anyway, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think this is my second time.
Yeah.
I was here just past New Year's.
Mhm.
All right, so I'll see everyone in 2087.
Well, and we can also see you at the event you mentioned, which is
I hope so.
described in the chat section.
Well, I love producing and I love showcasing people who I think have amazing talent. I get the same satisfaction of that as doing a show.
Uh-huh. Wonderful. And speaking of promoting others, I want to put a word in for a workshop that begins this coming Friday, which is being led by my wife, who is a Indian lady who is a pioneer in bringing psychodrama to India. And she's doing a workshop with my storytelling teacher, Laura Sims. They're especially working with a character from Romania, Romanian fairy tale and myth, a certain goddess who is in the mountains with the wild animals and the moon, and they'll be telling the stories of this goddess, and through psychodrama, role playing, how it connects to people's lives. So you probably have received a notice about this from me. If you haven't, you probably will in the next day or two. But I highly recommend my wife, and I highly recommend my storytelling teacher, Laura Sims. And this combination of story work and psychodrama is just really very exciting, because it really helps with character work. You get into a character, you act out a character, and everything that happens as a result. It triggers a lot of feelings and thoughts. Okay, so now our next storyteller, straight from Brooklyn, New York, Robin. And Robin, I'm so delighted you're telling in this series. I see the announcements about your work all the time. And I know you and your family have been involved in the story of the USA, going back many years. And you're doing a great job representing the USA. So
Whoa.
Please, yes, you are. So please introduce yourself fully, and please tell us a story.
Well, thanks, Eric. That's sweet. Appreciate that. I'm Robin. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I've lived in New York for most of my adult life, but I didn't grow up there. I grew up the next state over, in New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, where everything is a lot more dumpier than New York. New York is seriously cool, and New Jersey was seriously not cool. And that was how I grew up. And I loved it. But once I came to the city, I never left the cities. So this is a story that goes back I've just started writing stories about my childhood. This is like, I've always written stuff about my being an adult, and and what my story, my personal story. So this one is a brand new one. So I hope you like it, and I hope you have a lot of comments. So it's called Confirmed. So I'm 14 and I have this big problem. I have just completed 9 years of Jewish Sunday school, which consists of learning Jewish histories, prayers, rituals, and practices, which is at the temple. And that was mostly girls because only girls were in this kind of program. Boys got bar mitzvahed and girls in those days didn't. And we were going to have a big confirmation ceremony on a Saturday morning service. But the problem? I didn't have anything to wear. But you'll be wearing a graduation gown, my mom said. Oh, Mom, all the other girls will be getting new fancy dresses. Yes, but no one will see them. Well, sure they will. After they take off their gowns, everyone will see them. And I named all my friends who I knew had really good taste and always got something new. Look, Robin, you don't need a new dress. I mean, when else will you wear it? You can wear anything. This was awful. This was typical. My mother didn't believe in beauty for beauty's sake. Everything had to have a purpose. And I couldn't figure out what was important enough to merit a beautiful new dress. I mean, this was a big deal, being confirmed. What was I going to do? Well, my Aunt Ruth came to the rescue. I don't know how. I don't know when. I don't know what happened, but somehow she heard of my problem and, always ready to set her younger sister, my mother, straight, she invited me to New York City to shop with her for a beautiful dress. Maybe I pleaded, maybe my mother was tired, maybe she gave up, but maybe Ruth said she would pay for it. Yeah, and there'd be no cost to her. That must have been it. But one Saturday, I got on a train going to New York City, where I met the most gorgeous woman I knew, my very glamorous, my extremely cool Aunt Ruth, the toughest woman I ever knew, the bane of my mother's existence. Oh, a side note, Aunt Ruth always knew what other people needed, particularly my mom and her children. She went so far once as to purchase a bedspread, rugs, curtains, and sheets for my little sister's room. Without asking, without checking, without even talking to my little sister about what she wanted, she just sent it to us and put it on my mother's charge card. Ruth was the opposite of my mother in so many ways. She was diminutive and slender with bright auburn hair that I realize now must have been dyed. She had the most stylish clothes and wore beautiful shoes, perfect makeup, and a cloud of very expensive perfume always announced her imminent arrival. She wafted through husbands and lovers. Her job selling Israeli bonds took her across the country and over the world. She was so exciting to me, who lived in humdrum, boring, small-town New Jersey. She, on the other hand, lived in a fabulous apartment in a stately townhouse in the West Village in New York City. Her taste was exquisite. I was so excited to go shopping with her. Aunt Ruth, I shouted to her when the train came into Grand Central Station. She was waiting for me by the platform. She hugged me and gathered me tight and then said, "Okay, now we eat." I was really tongue-tied. I didn't know what to say when all this attention was, for the first time, focused on me by my dear, amazing Aunt Ruth. So I'm sure we went to some place on Madison Avenue in the 50s, very she, where we'd stopped at some kind of adorable little bistro. That was her style. And I watched her take small bites. And then I imitated that bird-like peck at her food. Peck, peck, peck. And how she sat with her legs crossed at the ankles. And I smoothed my clothes out as she did. And when we were finished and she put the napkin under the plate, I did the same. On to the reason for the visit. We were going to go to one of the most fabulous stores in New York City, one of the most luxurious, Saks Fifth Avenue. That was heady, I can tell you. I mean, I was used to shopping at Alexander's, which was a half-price place, or Bamberger's. That was the fancy one. When we walked into Saks, I couldn't believe it. It was so big. There were so many more departments. I mean, there wasn't one young miss. There was one young miss for casual, one young miss for something else, one young miss for this, children's. I mean, there were so many. And the things that were there, the clothing was gorgeous, fine, great cloth. I was so overwhelmed. So I just followed Aunt Ruth. She'd go, oh, come on, come, dear, come, dear, let's go. Okay, we're going to go upstairs. There's another department I'd like to take you to. I think it's exactly what you need. Young miss. Yes, you're a young miss. And we went through racks and racks of clothing. Well, take it back. I didn't go through it. Ruth did. Until she finally pulled out a dress and said, what do you think? It was beautiful. It was like nothing I ever thought that I would ever own or ever wear. And when I put it on, wow, it was perfect. It fit perfectly. It was everything I wanted. It was timely yet timeless. It was who I thought I could be, but I hadn't known how to get there. It was a cross between robin's egg blue and a light turquoise, soft with an Audrey Hepburn collar and a gentle shape. Swirling, but not too wildly, the fabric was made one of those popular new synthetics. And when I put it on, I really was someone else. But I was me, too. I was the princess about to be discovered, the actress ready for the first night show's thunderous applause and curtain calls, the Robin awaiting flight. I was ecstatic, and Aunt Ruth was satisfied. Then she asked, so, dear, do you have shoes to wear with this? No, I didn't. I had nothing that would go with this dress. She nodded and smiled a little grimly. I knew she was thinking of my mother. Come, dear. She whisked me away to the shoe department, and then, after a little time, I was there with a dress, white shoes, and a sense of self that was startlingly new. And when she put me on the train going home, with a belly full, we had stopped for ice cream, of course, I was not sure who I was or what we had just accomplished, except that I knew that I was not stuck as I was. Change was possible. We never did it again. I don't know why. Maybe Aunt Ruth did charge my mother for the dress and shoes. Maybe my mother told Ruth, leave my children alone. I don't know. But on that day of my confirmation, as I accepted the weight of the Jewish history that was behind me, that I was part of, I felt beautiful. I felt strong. I felt part of my family. I felt confirmed. Thank you.
Okay. Confirmed.
Our confirmation ceremony was a trip. It really, girls didn't get anything in those days. Anything. Not if you were part of our synagogue. But I still have the little white Bible they gave me with my name embossed. The Jewish Bible, as my husband calls it.
Mm-hmm. And so what was the actual ceremony? Did you read from the Torah, or do you remember what was actually happening?
There were 20 of us up there. We walked up, they said our name. They gave us a Bible, white for girls, blue for boys, and that was it.
Oh, so you didn't read to the group?
No, we didn't know Hebrew. We didn't learn anything.
Oh.
It was, I felt cheated, but I got my Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on to, for the next 3 years, I taught Jewish songs and stories.
Mm-hmm.
I loved your descriptions. I felt like I was just right there with you. You know, when when you learn storytelling, you're told to see it as a movie and take people into the movie with you. And they can see whatever they see, but they're seeing something, they're hearing something. And that's just how it was. I was just right there with you.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy to tell you about all my women rabbi friends.
Oh, I know.
It's so different now, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I grew up in that world also.
I was partly seeing a movie called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. You know that movie? Robin,
Yeah.
do you know it?
And the book, yeah.
Yeah, and the character played by Joan Blondell. I was thinking of Ruth for that. But the girl's mother doesn't want you know, the Joan Blondell character to be with her daughter, just like your mother didn't want Ruth to be with you so much.
She was really worried about her influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for it. I've always been grateful for her. My mom was an amazing woman, but really was, but I needed something else too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Rupa?
sorry, Rupa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so delightful. You took us there with you and brought Ruth to life. And though I grew up in India, I could resonate with parts of that story. We all had aunts and desperate need to get a particular dress like that. So thank you so much, and greetings from California. I'm glad I woke up to hear this story.
Thank you all.
Hmm.
And thank you for what you wrote over here. Woo.
What was written? It's in the chat?
Oh, it's in the chat. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Great things. Great compliment. I have to say that I think one of my triumphs as a mother is that I never did anything to upset the relationship of my daughter with my sister. Because I had a sister very much like Aunt Ruth, and I was probably a lot more like your mother. And my sister and my daughter are just so close. And I always thought that was a good thing that I didn't, that I allowed that to happen. So good for your mother also that she allowed some sort of relationship between the two of you.
And Robin, I love the world of possibility that you took us into, that you knew that other things were available to you and that you could walk into them. And I had that sense when you walked into Saks Fifth Avenue for the first time and saw the store and explored it. And of course, putting on the dress and feeling yourself transform. I thought it was very beautiful how you described it. Thank you.
Can I just tell you one little bit more, which was when my dad died and we were preparing the house to sell, I went down looking for the dress. I knew there was a bag and I was sure it was in there. I was so heartbroken when it wasn't.
So you don't know where it went.
My mother used to take things and turn them into other things. So that would have been a perfect thing for her to turn into an apron or something. I don't know. It might have reminded her of my aunt too. She really, you know, they all grew up too close to each other. I think.
Well, thank you for taking us into the experience of yourself as a young person and that very dramatic moment in your young life. We certainly all feel that we were there.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And for those of you who are like Aunt Ruth, God bless you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Sheila, are you here? Sheila Arnold in Virginia, but I guess she's not here. So, so then I think we will end the program. Does anyone want to say anything relating to Robin or any of the other storytellers or anything else before we end the session? Jennifer.
Yeah, I said in a personal response to Robin, I think the story so beautifully captures that poignant moment in a young girl's life as she's moving from childhood into the waiting woman, and you really imbue it with such a great sense of potential and your own potential, and put that against the backdrop of the dumpy, the ordinary background of New Jersey, and what I can imagine is a very hardworking, industrious mother. And then Aunt Ruth, who does wonderful things but charges them to your mother's account. Which it's just a stroke of brilliance. And I'm wondering if when she pays for the dress, because in those days you would charge it to your account, wouldn't you?
Right.
You could kind of observe from a little distance, she charged it to an account, but I wasn't sure whether it was her own or my mother's. And then that kind of is a setup for your mother's anger later, which you don't explain. Okay. And you might even not have to say she charged it to her account. And then you could add, oh, perhaps she had charged it to my mother's, when we get the angry response. But I love the poignancy of it. I love the potential. And we're all with you in fulfilling that dream of yourself. So lovely, lovely story.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny.
Well, Jennifer, thank you for saying that, because that gave a chance for Sheila Arnold to appear.
Yay!
Sheila, we were just about to end the session, but
I apologize profusely.
That's fine. That's fine.
I just forgot. That was my
the
fault.
timing is perfect.
Well, you're very kind. And so I'm to tell a story now, right?
Well, take a deep breath. Don't rush.
So
you're in Virginia, right?
I am in Virginia, and I am here, and that is good. And I just apologize.
That's fine. So please introduce yourself fully, and please tell us a story.
Amen. My name is Sheila Arnold, and I live in Hampton, Virginia, in the United States. And the story I'm going to tell, I've told a couple of times lately, but it is still a story that is resonating with me a lot. And so it just feels good to tell again. She woke up every morning and she raised the window and open the shutters, and the sun would come in, and she would bask there for just a moment. And then she would turn around and she would gather herself and her things together. She made sure her hair looked good. She had twisties in her hair, and it was red at the top. People called her red hair. And she would put on a nice outfit, and she even used crimson lipstick, crimson red lipstick every single day. And out the front door she would go with her basket in hand, and she would go visiting in the community. She visited all throughout the community. She encouraged and inspired, and she listened. But she didn't just come to her own community. No, she also went to other communities. And there she also visited. She encouraged, she inspired, she listened. It's what she did. And when she would walk out along the ways, oftentimes she was met with wolves. Blacks, grays, whites, mixed wolves who wanted her and would attempt to get her. And sometimes she would hear what they would say and she'd simply laugh and walk on away. Other times they would say something so foul she would turn around and say, "You don't speak to me like that." And the look in her eyes towards them, they would turn on heel and run away. And other times they would bring such fear in her heart by what they said or did, she ran to a place of safety. And so that is why she didn't recognize what was happening with Gertie May, one of the people she visited. You see, in her basket that she had, what she gave to folks from her basket was faith and hope and joy and courage. Those were the things she gave from her basket. But Gertie May found that she needed something more substantial. And to get that substance, she went to one of the wolves. The wolf was glad to give Gertie May what she wanted, but demanded in return red hair. And so it was on that day that Red Hair, unprepared, came over to Gertie May's house to visit, to encourage, inspire, and listen. And when she walked in the door, she got a hug, and she didn't notice anything different about Gertie May locking the door. And Gertie May stayed behind in the alcove as Red Hair walked forward into the living room and saw Wolf there. She turned and looked back at Gertie May, who dropped her head and shook her head. And Wolf hurt Red Hair. She didn't just hurt her on the outside, but she broke her, broke something on the inside. And when she was finally able to get up, she gathered her basket. She brushed past Gertie May, who had not moved. Gertie May tried to reach out and touch her. She flew her hand off. And she unlocked the door, and Red Hair went home. She closed and locked her door, and she closed the shutters and the windows and did not come back out. But those that she had visited heard what happened, and they took the gifts that she had given and they demanded justice. They went to the bear and demanded sanctions. And they went to the panther and asked for there to be something to be done, a place that he could be put. They went to Coyote and said, "He is a brother of yours." They went to Eagle and asked for justice. But Bear came back and said, "I have nothing to do with this." Panther said, "Where would I put him?" Coyote said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And Eagle flew higher and higher so justice could not be obtained. But the people would not be stopped. They demanded and demanded until finally, there was justice for red hair and punishment and consequence for this wolf. They realized it was just one wolf, but it was enough. And all during this time, the people had been going to Red Hair's door, knocking on the door, but there was no answer, so they began to leave baskets for her. It took some time, but eventually she opened up and pulled the baskets in, locking the door behind her. Later, she would actually open the door and be given the baskets and still lock the door behind her. There was time upon time upon time. And then one day, she woke up and she opened the window and threw open the shutters, and the sunlight came down and she basked in it. And she gathered her basket. After, of course, she looked in the mirror, someone in one of the baskets had given her red braids, and she put them in her hair, and now them red braids went all down. Several people had given all kinds of red lipstick. She had so many to choose from. Someone had put in her basket a red leather jacket. She looked good. And she gathered her basket with all she had to give and went out her door and went visiting, encouraging, inspiring, and listening. And she went to her community and to other communities, but there were days when she couldn't go visit, and she was tired. But on those days, the people came to her and encouraged and inspired and listened. Oh yes, this is the story of little, well, not really, Red riding through the hood. Thank you.
Thank you. Very beautifully told.
Thank you. Any thoughts from anybody or anything? Anything you have at all?
Yeah, it's a fangirl moment for me to hear a story from you. So I really enjoyed your telling. So that is something which I wanted to express here.
Thank you for your patience with me. I apologize so much, but thank you. Thank you for your words, Selena. I appreciate that. Robin?
That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. And I just love how you took an old story and turned it around so that the story was still there, the bones were still there, but you made it much more, you made it, this sounds dumb, not topical, but of this time. That was really of this time, and a cautionary, it's both a cautionary story and a story of when things are broken, they can be put back together. We need a community to do that. Anyway, you had a lot of different messages in there, but it was gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
I think, Robin, the word I would use is much more relatable. I mean, when you take stories that we all know and you adapt them and you make them relatable to now, that's what happened with this story, Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you, Briane. One of the things I really feel strongly about is that there's great comfort in basic stories and old stories. There's just great comfort in those stories. And when we use those stories and adapt them to meet today, there's a comfort that comes with that. You know, that people are are prepared to listen to it, and then they can hear it with a new ear, but they also they're more comfortable in listening. They can hear even hard lessons because, excuse me, because of the comfort of the old tale that's in there. Rupa?
Sheila, that was, I just love the way you brought this story, this universal story. We all heard the story in the past, but the way you brought it in to the social justice scenario was just great. And I could relate to some of this because I worked as a domestic violence advocate, and we came across so many wolves when we were working and trying to, serve our community. So thank you for, bringing this to us.
Thank you.
And Sheila, when you said that the young woman had encouraged and listened and inspired so many people, and then of course how she was broken inside, but very slowly how the community helped her because of all the gifts she'd given to them. I love that part.
Thank you.
You also took the story back to its roots, which is so interesting also. It is a story that, we know the Disneyfied version, we know the gentler, mats on the playground so no one gets hurt story. So that was really nice. So you both modernized it and found its roots. I'm just going to say beautiful.
Thank you.
Heart.
Yes, I was informed the other day when I told this story for some adults, and before I told this, I told Red Riding Hood, but I told the older version where there's no huntsman or no woodsman that comes and saves the day, and I told the older version where if you are dumb, then you get killed. If you don't listen to your parents and start talking to people down the path, then you're not going to live. And so that's the old version. And I had a woman, ooh, a little horrible, isn't it? Isn't there a better ending? I'm like, no, there's an unreal ending. We could just, have the huntsman show up, kill a perfectly logical wolf who had just done what he was supposed to do, and then cut him open, and out come two complete human beings ready to live. And she went, oh, that doesn't sound good either.
Sheila, I once read that the original Red Riding Hood, or one of the versions, was the French version. I can't remember who's the one who's known for recording a lot of the fairy tales in France, and it was
Charles Perrault.
Yeah, no, Perrault, yes, and it was
Yes.
I think a cautionary tale. That's what I read, that it was a cautionary tale because against the owners who were always trying to tempt or rape the domestic help. So it was like a cautionary tale of how to avoid those, the lords of the manor. So you weren't really far off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Eric, for letting me come in even so late
Of
missing
course.
everyone.
You can watch the recording.
I will do that.
Wonderful. Really wonderful.
Thank
Jennifer,
you,
you're
Eric,
unmuted.
for this.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I did. When you introduced the idea of the wolf, we have, in the context of your story, the image of an exploitive male, right? But then at the you brought in other animal creatures, and that sort of really blew it wide open again. So I love the fact that this is it was not only a two-legged story, that it was a four-legged, and that the idea of justice can spill over and should spill over into the four-legged world. And I love that, that justice is something that is bigger than really just the human condition. And I thought that was, it just took me by surprise. And I thought that was a lovely addition to the story. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
It has been a really wonderful session, and I want to thank all of you for helping me fulfill myself, because I was raised in Midtown Manhattan, going to the theater as a child and teenager numerous times a week with my father. He was a theater critic. And throughout the 60s and 70s, I went to the theater and I fell in love with the theater, and I was writing plays by the time I was a teenager, and I was living and breathing and dreaming Shakespeare and Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, and Henrik Ibsen, and all of the great playwrights. And now, through this storytelling work that I'm doing and that I'm hosting and that I'm coaching, I feel I'm in that same world. So I want to thank you all very much. Of course, by the 70s, I was also going to experimental theater in New York City, including Spalding Gray. I'm sure many of you are aware of Spalding Gray, the storyteller, who was the first kind of crossover from theater into storytelling. And anyway, thank you all very much. Let's stop the recording now and say goodbye properly. Just a second here.